Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to the worst ever Resident Evil video game. You ever get that feeling in your gut where you just need to play some mid? Is that just me? Like sometimes I just want to go back to the older generations and just play a game that I know is absolute slop. You know, there's a lot of common phrases that get tossed around in gaming. One of them is they don't make them like they used to. And it's in these moments when you fire up a game like Operation Raccoon City that you go, thank God they don't make them like they used to. Anyway, I had this weird thought while I was playing it. It's one of those games where you fire it up and you're like, wouldn't it be hilarious if I beat this game? And then you spend like 5 hours with it and it's done. And you did beat it. I did that crazy thing. I beat Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City for the first time. Why? Because I felt like it. I don't know if there's a psychological factor behind it, like, hey, I'm a really busy person, but guess what? I got 5 hours to blow, and I just did that. How about that? Suck it, life. So that's what I did. I played and completed Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. And I have a lot of thoughts because I have one core memory with this game. I have played this game one time before. I've talked a lot about my GameStop hack when I was in high school. So me and two of my best friends would go to GameStop every week. We had $90 of trading credit that we got months before from just trading in crap we didn't want. And we just kept recycling that, buying used games at GameStop and then playing them for a week and returning them. And the best ones would stick in the collection for longer, so it made this kind of fun choice and consequence. Like, do I want to commit before I spend more cash at GameStop? Like, I don't want to do that. You can blame me for them going out of business at this point. But we ended up choosing Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Why was that? Because during this time of the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, everything had to have co-op. Everything had to have multiplayer, and that's because people like myself and others were seeking that out. We love a good co-op game. Resident Evil, co-op, hey, I got great memories with like RE5. So what does Operation Raccoon City bring to the table? Not much. Not much. But the real reason I pulled Operation Raccoon City off my shelf, beyond proving my schedule wrong, was simply this. I was having a conversation with a friend, we were reminiscing on old Resident Evil games, and we led ourselves down the path of Operation Raccoon City, and I went, well, let me fire it up, but first, let's take a look at what the community has to say. And like many a critically panned game that you'll find online where you're like, there's no way a community actually exists for this game. Lo and behold, I find a lot of people fondly remember this one. I even saw people going to the length of saying this is one of the best Resident Evil games ever. I don't agree at all, but I can see the charm in this idea of a hypothetical what-if story playing as the villains. It's a co-op zombie shooter. It was the good old days of Xbox Live. And honestly, for some people, it was said that this was a very underrated multiplayer game as well. Whatever reason it may be good or bad, kind of doesn't matter because it went on to sell over 2 million copies and was considered by Capcom a financial success. But I was just stunned to see, wow, people really love this game. And I remember my friends screaming at this game. So is it really that good? Is it really that bad? Let's find out. To add a little bit of history on top, this was a very dangerous year for Resident Evil. After RE5, which I loved at least, okay? I'll just speak for myself. I think it's a great game. A lot of people thought Resident Evil's walking a bit away from its identity. So 2012 was the year of the full send for Capcom. Like, you thought we were away from it? Oh, watch this. So at the top of the year, they bring you this co-op action game that plays more like a third-person shooter than anything else. It's like, okay, it's a spin-off title. It wasn't very good at all. And then at the end of the year, you got the ultimate departure in the mainline series in Resident Evil 6, which we've talked about here on Retro Rebound. So there's your history lesson. It was a very strange time for Capcom and Resident Evil. They were not the publisher they are nowadays, where you see that Capcom label nowadays, you go, this is probably going to be peak. But back during the 2010s, very spotty time for our friends at Capcom. So let's talk about my first ever romp through the entirety of Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. If you're new here and you're into nostalgic and retrospective content, consider subscribing. Okay, like I mentioned, I picked up this game with a couple of buds years ago during my GameStop hack days. And we got about 2 or 3 missions in until we got to a specific one I'll talk about in a little bit. And I distinctly remember my friend raging his brains out, like screaming at the top of his lungs in Xbox Live party chat, and that this game is awful and we need to return it now. Like, he was very angry about this game, and he wasn't even a Resident Evil fan. So we didn't get much further than that, and that's all I needed to know. I was like, yeah, it wasn't very good, but here I am finishing it. Let's go through it top to bottom. So the idea behind this game is that it takes place around the same time as Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. And it's this non-canon, what-if style story of you playing as some agents from Umbrella and kind of interweaving that story into the other events that were happening around Resident Evil 2 and 3. So that means you're going to see like Nemesis from Resident Evil 3. There's a mission around that. It means that you're going to see Leon Kennedy. And spoiler alert, you have a choice to kill him at the end of the game, which caught me off guard. We'll talk about that. But that is the general premise of this game. So taking those events and this breakout in Raccoon City and kind of telling the story from the perspective of the Umbrella operatives, which I thought was a really cool idea. At the start of the game, you get a selection of 12 different characters that you can pick from, and they each have their own abilities and preferences, effectively their classes, right? So I played as Lupo for the majority of my time in Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. I equipped ability on her where she had infinite ammo and it would significantly reduce the recoil and increase the accuracy. So if I had a lot of enemies in front of me, I would just open fire. So the game begins with you trying to stop the outbreak of the virus through Birkin, who's chasing you through this facility. And it's there you're immediately met with like the god-awful controls. This game feels terrible to play, and it's really weird because, again, it released the same year as RE6, which I said in our retrospective, like, that game still feels good to play outside of the cover shooting. What's interesting is Operation Raccoon City gets cover shooting. Like, you kind of float into a wall, and your character immediately crouches, and it just kind of works on its own. Whereas Resident Evil 6 had this really weird third-person cover system where you'd be aiming with the left stick when you were shooting from cover in third person. It was very strange. But Resident Evil 6 had great melee, had great impact, great movement, diving. Like, the mobility and the aiming and the shooting in Resident Evil 6 felt good. And I wonder if in a world where Operation Raccoon City had this style of Resident Evil gameplay, if it actually would have been just a guilty pleasure. I mean, I imagine people still find it to be a guilty pleasure, and I say that confidently because out of absolute nowhere in my first session with the game, in the middle of the night, by the way, I was playing this at like midnight as just sort of a joke, someone joined my game. Now, you can look at the Steam player charts right now for Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City for a gauge of how little people are playing this. Well, now we're going to shrink it down a little bit more because I was playing it on my Xbox 360 at midnight, and a person joined my video game. I was awestruck by this, that there was another player online on their Xbox 360, and out of every game they could have picked out of the library on the Xbox 360, at that fateful moment, there was one other individual playing Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City and happened to want to hop into a co-op campaign. I was like, this is unbelievable. I feel like I just discovered a new species or something. Like, what the hell? There's someone playing this game with me? Okay. So I romped through co-op quite a bit with this individual. And thank goodness they were there because I actually may have tapped out early. So the first real speed bump beyond the controls occurs in a mission where the Lickers show up. Now, the Lickers, I remember them from Resident Evil 5. You know, you have to quietly maneuver by them. But in this game, they're treated more like a horde, and they're all over this stinking place. It's on fire, and they'll knock you down, drag you around, wrap you up. And this game has no respect for you in combat. Like, oh, there's 3 other enemies attacking you? Okay, here's a 4th, 5th, and 6th. Like, they'll do that. They do that through one way, which is blood frenzy. So if you're bleeding, all the zombies will turn toward you and run at you and try to kill you. So, okay, that's a mechanic. But when it comes to the Lickers, they're relentless and ruthless, and I died in here multiple times to the point where I was spectating this individual just running through the mission. This individual was an extremely high level and shockingly good at Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City that I was like, this is the person who finds it to be a guilty pleasure and actually enjoys this thing. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't get it. Because when I was playing through that mission, I was like, if I didn't have a high level player who just walked me through that, I never would have surpassed it. You see, the thing that really gets this game is a clear lack of testing, because there are these almost insurmountable, unfathomable roadblocks that the game puts in front of you. And this is one of them, where it is throwing enemy after enemy at you, and you don't do a lot of damage in this game. Like, even with your abilities I was talking about, even with some of the best weapons they give you, just the damage balancing is terrible. Like, to take out one of these lickers, you want to pump like a full accurate clip of ammunition into them, and you'll usually get like 5 rounds to use. So you're not really playing with a lot of gasoline here in Operation Raccoon City. Like, the way your character is built is a little more conservative. Like, you're going to be very selective of when you take down enemies. So, okay, cool, got it. But then they'll throw like 80 at you and you'll run out of ammo and have to use a pistol, which is, even unless you unlock the Desert Eagle, it's pretty much ineffective. Other roadblocks are like toward the end of the game. Like the mission right before the finale when you're trying to get to Leon, it's a bunch of Spec Ops soldiers who are then fighting a bunch of zombies, and then you're trying to push through all of them. But the way the AI is programmed is when you enter the scene, you're target number 1. So you're gonna be getting shot at, swarmed, with some of the worst controls, some of the worst movement you can imagine. Yes, worse than like tank controls in Resident Evil, and not have a weapon that does enough damage to get through it. So you just have to cheese the game, throw grenades, and watch as your frame rate tanks through the floor as you do it. It's absurd. I was playing it like, wow, you know, for someone who sits here and says time in, time out, they don't make them like they used to. It's these games that are incredibly sobering that I go, wow, thank goodness. And I don't think this really comes down to class, because after each mission, you'll get XP, and you'll be able to spend this experience on new weapons, no upgrades for them really, just new weapons. And most of them you can find in the levels and just keep with you. So it just determines your starting weapon. Okay, I think the best weapon in the game, in my opinion, were the shotguns, like the assault shotgun or the riot shotgun. I was one-shotting everyone. The game actually felt okay in those moments, but they were tough to find. So I can see a little bit of that, but otherwise you're spending this XP on abilities that I don't think are strong factors in the game. For example, they're really built around the game's versus mode. This was mostly a multiplayer game. So like one of the characters has the ability to go invisible and stealth kill some enemies. That's great in versus mode, but it makes no sense in this zombie PvE mode with the campaign. It's completely useless. So even though I was playing as Lupo the whole time, it was like, what is switching gonna even do at the end of the day? Especially because there was another roadblock where Nemesis showed up. You have this parasite that you extract from another Nemesis, and you have to put it into the Nemesis with like the minigun, and you have to do this to bring it under control for Umbrella. Now, okay, cool, like love seeing a little like RE3 find its way into this story in, I guess, a natural way. This story has very few natural moments, as I'll talk about, especially with its ending. But okay, sure, I'll bite. Now, what's interesting is this thing just will unleash a minigun at you and hose you down in a minute if you dare draw its attention. What'll happen though, if you're at least playing individually, which at this point in time you definitely will be, unless you're like me and I guess you hit a random lottery co-op partner, is all of your AI partners are gonna die. And as they go down, then all the enemies target you, all the shooting targets you, and there's no hiding. So this was the part of the game I had to redo the most, because Nemesis would just rain hell and fire down upon all of my lovely Umbrella teammates. They'd die, and then he'd like shoot me through the floor and drop me. And he would just relentlessly, I mean, he's got a minigun for God's sake, so he would just unleash on me. The trick though, is that again, the lack of balance occurs here. Okay, I can deal with Nemesis and zombies. You're getting me moving around. I'm dialed into the gameplay a little bit. Like I can kind of see a touch of the charm here for some people who like this sort of thing. Okay, I like a little mid-game myself. However, when it comes to the moment that you start to whittle away Nemesis' health bar, and then the Spec Ops show up, so now you've got minigun shooting at you, Spec Ops shooting at you, and there's like 8 of them shooting at you at once, plus the zombies chasing you, and there's different versions of zombies, like the RPD zombies, that just have way more health than all the others, and so it is just relentless. You just have to get a lucky draw of sort of everyone staying alive, making sure when you're trying to revive your teammate, because they're basically bullet sponges at this point, that you can just resuscitate them. Please take some shots for me so I can go heal up. That's what the game is. And it brings in some other balancing concerns, like, why can I only carry one antiviral agent? Why can I only carry one first aid agent? Like, why are these limited resources that they give me so many of? So if I'm fighting Nemesis and he's raining fire upon me, Okay, I'm gonna heal up with my first aid spray, and then I gotta go back to the corner at the first start of the area and grab that first aid spray that I'm gonna need because I can't carry two, heaven forbid. It's awful, but not as bad as the ending, which we're gonna get into. But first, I wanna show you a complete in-box experience. How about that? Let's see how Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City is faring on that front. Is it better than the story? Let's find out. All right, we have Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. As you can see, it comes with a little free DLC for the Spec Ops Mission 1. Didn't play it. All right, so here on the back, it says, Raccoon City has fallen. You are part of Umbrella's elite cleanup squad sent in to purge all evidence of their involvement. All survivors must be eliminated. I can't lie, like, this goes hard here. This goes hard, right? Like, there's a lot about this game that you see and you're like, all roads lead to hell. Like, the messaging for the game is cool. And wouldn't you know it, but yes, ladies and gentlemen, they even checked off a very particular Maddie themed box. It is an illustrated manual, and we love to see it. Now, the manual itself, like for example, their campaign breakdown is awful. In the campaign, you will play through the game's story as a member of an elite squad. That's it. Like, hey, thanks for that. Okay, I'll run with that. Weapons and abilities can be unlocked using XP gained in campaign and versus. You can also play missions cooperatively with players from around the world. But yeah, nothing really else. No like brief little summary of what the actual story is, just what the campaign does. You got the controls here. You got all of the UI breakdown up next. This is the best part of the manual, I think. It kind of just breaks down these neat little illustrations, transitions like infection. When you get infected, you can become a zombie if your health bar runs out and then your teammate has to kill you, which is cool. What exactly is a blood frenzy? If you're bleeding, zombies will be driven into a frenzy and yeah, they will jump you. Very frustrating. How do you get into cover? You just walk right into it. Diving, quick draws, a lot of different little controls here. If this was like the RE6 gameplay system, again, it would have been awesome. Melee combat, for example, when you do a brutal kill, you'd think it'd be like holding the melee button or something, but it actually says if you've knocked an enemy off balance, press the A button to perform a brutal kill. So yeah, the controls in this game are also just extremely weird. You can tackle, use them as a shield, which protects you a little bit in firefights. And then just a little bit more about the versus mode here. There's team attack, biohazard, heroes, survivor. It was more of a multiplayer geared video game, but it was that era, of course, where every game had to have multiplayer. And so that's what you've got in a complete in-box copy of Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Not bad, can't lie. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's a little Resident Evil 3 and there's a little Resident Evil 2. So at one point in the game, when you're in Raccoon City itself, you see the outbreak is taking over. Umbrella's trying to control the situation. It's spiraling out of control. And there's our favorite boy, Leon S. Kennedy, who's trying to get out of this mess. Obviously, Leon's with Claire, trying to protect Sherry because Sherry's got the antibodies. And so Umbrella sees this as a threat, yada, yada, yada. So you finally corner Leon in the final mission of the game. And I'm thinking like, what's gonna happen here? Because we got him cornered in a train yard basically, and there's 4 of us, one of him, he's on one knee. Claire is saying, we'll come to you. Like this final cutscene's depicting a very strange moment in this even non-canon story where even though it's non-canon, it's trying to very much adhere to Resident Evil 2 and 3. And all of a sudden a choice pops up. You can defend Leon or you can kill him. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm very curious what happens if you kill him. And all of a sudden, you spawn on an entirely different map. There's no cutscene. There's no story interaction. I don't even know where the hell I actually am because last I checked, when I'm sitting there talking to Leon and I choose the option to kill him, like it's 4 of us right there. Why are we in this room all of a sudden? Again, no clue. No clue. But anyway, it explains in the loading screen that what turns out is happening here is that me and one teammate have voted to kill Leon. Meanwhile, there are 2 other teammates on my team who have now decided, no, we need to protect Leon. And so the mission is going through not really any zombies, but your teammates you spent your whole campaign with, killing them and then killing Leon. Now I failed because this, again, going back to the PvP method, the stealth dude, I forget his name, shows up and just waxes me, no problem. Okay, sure. So I'm like, oh, I have to watch this cutscene again, die again, have to watch the cutscene again, no skipping. Okay, I'm gonna choose defend. And it's the same thing. Your team has split into 2. and it's time to now protect Leon. After you protect him, a cutscene plays, and you end your contract with Umbrella, and the game ends. One of the most abrupt, disjointed plots and endings I've ever seen. And what's funny is they dared to have a DLC campaign, which I'm sorry, I couldn't do that for y'all. This was enough for me. They did have a Spec Ops campaign, which shows the other side of the tale. And I kind of like this side A, side B thing. It's very Resident Evil, of course, you know, like here's the Claire campaign, here's the Leon campaign, little permutations throughout. But this gameplay was just so bad that there was no way in hell I was going to go back and play another campaign and see the other side of this very disjointed story that I imagine had very little cutscene support if the ending of the base game was anything to go by. So yeah, that was my experience with the worst ever Resident Evil game. Really lives up to the title. I think people forget about this when they're talking about, say, Resident Evil 3 Remake or Resident Evil 6, like those levels of Resident Evil disappointment that people talk about. I think we forget about Operation Raccoon City. So I'm happy to take the sacrifice for all of you. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Have you played it through to completion? Is it a guilty pleasure of yours? Did you have a better time with it than I did? Let me know down below. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.